The courtroom was supposed to be a place of justice, a place where truth could finally be heard. But for Naomi, it felt like a trap, a stage where power silenced voices like hers before they ever had the chance to speak. The judge demanded quiet, the lawyers twisted words, and the defendant's future balanced on the edge of lies. She was told to obey, to sit still, to remain silent. But Naomi carried a truth too heavy to bury, and when she chose to speak, it shook the very walls of the court. The question is, are we ready to listen? The courthouse loomed like a fortress in the center of the city, its marble columns gleaming under the morning sun. Inside, the air was heavy with procedure. Shuffling papers, echoing footsteps, the sharp bang of a gavel calling for order. For most people, this place was intimidating, a place where voices were swallowed by rules and where power sat high above, cloaked in robes of authority. For Naomi, a young black woman seated quietly at the edge of the courtroom, the building felt even heavier. To her, it wasn't just stone and glass. It was a reminder of years of being silenced, dismissed, and treated as though her words carried less weight. She had grown up watching her community struggle for fairness that never seemed to arrive, and now here she was, expected to sit, to wait, to listen, but not to be heard. Naomi wasn't a lawyer, nor a person with wealth or influence. She was simply a witness, a worker, a daughter, someone who had seen too much to remain silent. Yet she carried herself with quiet strength, the kind that came from generations of resilience. Her voice, though soft, carried truths that others wanted buried. The courtroom buzzed with small conversations, the defense shuffling papers, the judge scanning the docket with practiced indifference. Everything moved like a well-oiled machine, everyone playing their part. But Naomi sat there knowing something the rest of the room didn't. Her words, if spoken, could disrupt the entire rhythm. The judge's gavel struck again, demanding silence, setting the stage for routine. But beneath the polished wood and rehearsed authority, tension was already building. Naomi felt it in her chest. The moment was coming when she would be forced to choose between compliance and truth. And when it arrived, the quiet walls of that courtroom would never be the same again. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber, clipped and precise. He demanded order, demanded silence, demanded that every word fit neatly within the boundaries of his control. But beneath his authority, Naomi could feel the undercurrent, the subtle ways the system worked to keep voices like hers quiet. The case unfolding that morning was about more than just legal arguments. It was about a man from her community, accused of something he hadn't done, his character dragged through the mud while the defense painted him as dangerous. Naomi had been there the night of the incident. She knew the truth, knew what she had seen, but as she sat in that wooden chair, she realized the odds were stacked high against her. The prosecutor glanced her way, almost dismissively, as if her testimony was a formality rather than a necessity. The defense lawyer smirked when her name was called, already preparing to twist her words before she could even speak them. And the judge, leaning back in his chair, looked at her with the same expression she had seen countless times before. Impatience. A look that said, "Make it quick, don't waste our time." Naomi's throat tightened. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say, but now she saw clearly the wall of indifference surrounding her. Every gesture in that room seemed to echo the same unspoken message. Your voice doesn't matter. When she began, her words were soft, careful, laying out the facts as she remembered them. But before long, interruptions cut through. The defense objected unnecessarily. The judge sustained with barely a pause. Each time she tried to explain further, she was cut short. "Stick to the question," the judge ordered. "Answer only what is asked." Her frustration grew. The truth was tangled, complex, but they wanted it cut into neat, hollow fragments. She looked toward the man on trial, his shoulders hunched, his eyes dim with resignation. If she faltered now, his fate would be sealed. The defense lawyer circled like a predator, picking apart her testimony. He twisted her words, raised doubts about her memory, even hinted that her presence that night was suspicious. Whispers moved through the courtroom, subtle nods of agreement from those already convinced she couldn't be trusted. Naomi's hands trembled against the wooden stand. Every fiber in her body screamed to stay calm, to play by the rules, but the weight of injustice pressed harder. She thought of her mother, of the stories passed down of voices silenced in courtrooms just like this. She thought of all the times her community had been told to wait quietly for justice that never came. The judge banged his gavel sharply, cutting through her thoughts. "Answer the question," he barked. His tone wasn't just commanding, it was dismissive. The same dismissal she had faced her entire life. And that was when Naomi felt something shift inside her. Her silence would not protect her. Her obedience would not save the man on trial. The gavel echoed again, louder this time. "Silence!" the judge ordered, but Naomi knew the moment was approaching. The moment where her choice would define everything. She looked out across the courtroom, at the rows of faces, at the man whose life hung in the balance, at the officer whose lies had built this case, and at the judge whose gavel tried to bury truth. Her voice, if she used it fully, would break more than the rules of the courtroom. It could break the illusion of justice itself. The gavel slammed again, the sound cracking through the chamber like thunder. "Silence!" the judge barked, his voice booming, heavy with authority. But Naomi didn't move. Her pulse pounded in her ears, every instinct telling her to shrink back, to obey, to let the system swallow her words like it always had. But then her eyes locked on the defendant, the man whose life was hanging by a thread. His shoulders sagged under the crushing weight of injustice, his eyes hollow with the expectation of yet another betrayal by a system that never believed him. And in that instant, Naomi knew her silence would condemn him. Her voice rose, steady at first, then stronger, sharper, louder than she ever imagined it could be. "No more," she said, her words slicing through the courtroom's tension. Heads turned. The defense tried to shout her down. The judge pounded his gavel, demanding order. But Naomi refused to stop. She spoke the truth she had carried for too long. She described the lies told by the officer, the manipulations, the way evidence was twisted to fit a story that never happened. Every sentence felt like it cracked open the walls around her, shattering the silence that had caged her. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, whispers spreading like wildfire. The judge's face flushed with fury, but his threats no longer mattered. Naomi wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for every voice that had been silenced before her, for every injustice buried under the weight of power. The defense lawyer froze, his confidence unraveling as her words cut through the falsehoods he had built. The officer shifted in his seat, his eyes darting nervously as the cracks in his testimony were exposed. And as Naomi's final words rang out, the room itself seemed to hold its breath. This was no longer a trial. It was a reckoning. The gavel struck again. But this time, the sound no longer silenced her. It only echoed the truth she had unleashed. The courtroom was no longer the same place it had been when Naomi first walked in. The silence that followed her words wasn't the silence of control. It was the silence of truth, sinking into unwilling ears. The defendant lifted his head for the first time that day, his eyes filled with something that had almost been lost. Hope. The judge, red-faced and rattled, tried to regain his authority, but the damage was done. Naomi's testimony, raw, unfiltered, unbroken by fear, had shattered the veneer of order. The jurors shifted in their seats, no longer looking at the accused as a criminal, but as a man fighting to be seen. Even those who had doubted her couldn't ignore the power of her conviction. Naomi didn't stay to watch the final verdict. She left the courtroom with her head high, her heart still racing, knowing that what she had done was bigger than the case itself. She had spoken when silence was demanded, She had broken the rule designed to keep her quiet, and in doing so, she had given voice to everyone who had been told their truth was inconvenient, unwanted, or unworthy. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. The world hadn't changed overnight, but Naomi had. She knew the fight for justice was far from over, that countless others would face the same walls she had stood against. But she also knew that courage could spread, that one act of defiance could ripple outward and force people to see what they tried to ignore. This wasn't just one trial, one story, or one woman's decision. It was a reminder that silence protects the powerful, but truth, spoken boldly, can break the walls that hold injustice in place. So the question remains, how many more voices must be silenced before we finally decide to listen? And when the next Naomi stands, will we echo her truth or bury it again?